Dana White's Contender Series. This is Season 7, Episode 9. We have 5 fights lined up this Tuesday night. I'm John Kelly. Let's hear the picks. We're going to get things started in the flyweight division as Lucas Hacha comes in as a minus 152 favorite. The comeback on Davey Costa is plus 122. And we'll start on the Hacha side. He's a 16-1 prospect fighting out of Brazil. Of those 16 victories, 9 of them have come by knockout. Multiple times it was maybe where he was losing the fight, or at least it was competitive early. And he just has good enough cardio to withstand that early adversity and kind of just power through that until he eventually can melt his opponent. So he's not really a one-punch power guy, but he does have some solid combinations on the feet, and I'd expect that to be the advantage for him here against Davey Costa, who he's a 14-3 prospect fighting out of Brazil as well. Majority of those have come inside the distance, a lot of first-round finishes, and while he does have power himself, he's not really a big volume guy. Yes, he can catch you on the feet, but it's very clear he's looking to get this fight to the ground. He's got good timing on his takedowns. If he gets in top position, he's got vicious ground and pound, but he's very dangerous on the mat. He's going to look to submit you as well. He's a former CBJJO World Cup champion, and I think he's going to have the grappling advantage here. While I'd expect Hacha to be the more active striker on the feet, probably landing in those combinations like I talked about, Costa is going to try to chop him down. He's got very good leg kicks. He's always constantly looking to attack the legs and then go to the takedowns. And I mentioned the timing. We've seen Hacha be taken down multiple times on the regional scene and be controlled as well. So I'd expect that to be the advantage here. And I think Costa could put him in some bad spots on the mat and potentially get the finish. So we're going with the underdog here in Costa. Costa by submission is the official pick, and he's going to kick things off for the DGen parlay. Next fight up in the welterweight division, we have Raymond Magomedov, a minus 170 favorite. The comeback on Mauricio Huffy is plus 152. And we'll start on the Magomedov side. He trains out of Eagles MMA with Habib Nurmagomedov, among others, that typical Dagestani crew. He's a 10-1 prospect fighting out of Russia. The majority of his wins have come inside the distance. On the feet, he's a flashy striker. He's going to throw a lot of different kicking style attacks at you, similar to Umar Nurmagomedov on the feet, in terms of that he wants to keep you at distance and really use those flashy leg kicks to his advantage, keep you at bay, and then if he needs to, he can lean on the Russian grappling, smother style grappling chops, because he is fully capable of that. He's a former combat sambo world champion and a kung fu champion as well. Started training at a very young age. He's been in the game for quite some time. The one concern is that he's coming off about an 18-month layoff at 33 years old. I'm 33 myself, and I can tell you, if I'm not staying fresh, then I'm not feeling as good as I would. So that's the one concern. The other concern of Magomedov is that in the past, I mentioned the grappling. Offensively, it's great. He's capable of landing takedowns when he gets you on top, smothering ground and pound. He's looking to finish the fight. But we have seen him give up takedowns defensively and kind of flop to his back, look for an ankle lock, not work back to his feet. So there are some concerns. It's not all roses on the Magomedov side. And then on the flip side, Mauricio Huffy is an 8-1 prospect fighting out of Brazil, and all of his wins have come by knockout. He's never reached the third round in his entire career. So the gas tank is unproven. I think the defensive grappling is unproven as well, but it's clear that he's a very good striker. He previously trained with the Fighting Nerds, with Kai Bohayo and those guys. He's also got rounds in with Ricardo Ramos in the past as well. So he's been around some good UFC fighters, but outside of the striking, I just don't think there's much you have to worry about. Yes, he's got a strong jab, a fast one too. It's clear that he has power, but outside of that, there's just really not much else to his game from what I've seen. And I think it's very clear to me that Magomedov is just the more well-rounded of the two. And I think the grappling is going to be the game plan here. I think he goes to it, and I think that's the difference. So we're going Magomedov by TKO. That's the official pick. Next fight up in the light heavyweight division, we have Magomed Gaziasulov, the biggest betting favorite on the card at minus 800. The comeback on Jose Medina is plus 550. And we'll start on the Magomed side. He's one of the better prospects, I think, relative to weight division on this entire season. There's a fighter actually later on this card in the main event who I think is likely the best prospect that we will see this entire year. So we'll get to him later. But I think Gadzu Yasulov at least has a high ceiling if he were to reach the UFC, because in the light heavyweight division, it really doesn't take much skill, and I think he has some skill. On the feet, he's a very good striker. He wants to keep you at distance, similar to Magomedov, who we talked about last fight. He's very long for the division, but he wants to be at range where he can land those big body kicks, the big head kicks as well. He's a good striker, and then again, he has that Russian grappling style background where he can go to that if he needs to, but typically he's just dusting guys on the feet because he hasn't faced much competition on the regional scene. So that's the one concern, is he's relatively unproven. I think he's a good prospect, definitely has a future, but I want to see him take tougher fights. And I don't think that's the case here against Jose Medina, who I think is being brought in to showcase the Magomed side, because Medina, yes, he comes from a boxing background. He's a former two-time national boxing champion, but he's another one, super padded record, hasn't really faced anybody, and he's even lost to a couple bums on the regional scene as well. So I just don't think, I can't really see the way that he wins this fight, because if you tell me he outstrikes Gadzi Yasulov on the feet, I would be surprised, because I think it's basically going to be Medina trying to close distance, and Gadzi Yasulov is going to be able to keep him at bay with those kicking attacks and likely land something heavy. And then obviously if it does hit the mat, I favor the Russian as well. So I'm going Gadzi Yasulov by TKO. That's the official pick, and he's going to keep things rolling in the DGen parlay. Up next in the bantamweight division, we have Victor Hugo, a -130 favorite. The comeback on Eduardo Torres is +100. We'll start on the Hugo side. Of those 23 victories, 16 of them have come by finish. He's got multiple first-round finishes. He's a really dangerous grappler, honestly. I think on the feet, he's not the best minute winner. So it's kind of funny, because these are typically guys that I like to fade. But on Contender Series, I think you really have to factor in that finishing ability. And I think that clearly favors Hugo in this fight, because that's the one thing he's good at. On the feet, he's not a huge volume guy, but he does have power if he connects clean with one of the strikes that he throws. But he's typically trying to close distance, clinch you up, peel you to the ground, and when you're on the ground, he's either landing ground and pound or hunting those submissions. And I do think he's a pretty slick submission grappler, and I think he could catch a guy like Eduardo Torres, who's a 16-1 fighter out of Chile, but he just hasn't faced anybody on the regional scene. His one note that he's actually faced someone half decent was Nohelin Hernandez, who he lost to. That's the one career loss. And Hernandez made it to the UFC, but he was not very good. He was submitted in both of his UFC fights and went back to the regional scene and beat guys like Eduardo Torres. So it's just kind of not the best look that the one time where he did take a step up, he failed. So it's not that he's a bad fighter. I do expect him to have a cardio advantage if this fight does get extended. We've seen Hugo gas in the past, but I don't really trust his defensive grappling. I know he's been working on his wrestling, and he is capable of landing takedowns, but I don't trust his grappling. And I think that would be a mistake here against Hugo, who's liable to, roll for an ankle lock, heel hook, something like that. And he is good with those. So I don't think you can rule that out. So this is one where I mentioned I'm usually trying to fade just those style of fighters like Hugo, but I really see him catching Torres with a submission and getting his hand raised. So we're going with the slight favorite in Victor Hugo, and he's the fourth pick in the DGen parlay. Which brings us to our main event in the light heavyweight division, as Murtaza Talha is a -300 favorite. The comeback on Hideo Ballato is +240. And I mentioned it earlier, it seems like there's always a theme with a lot of these weeks on Contender Series. Like the one week it was, we were highlighting the Canadian promotion. The one week we were highlighting Jungle Fight promotion. This is the week where we're highlighting, the Russians, the Dagestani fighters, a guy like Talha fighting out of Bahrain, who's also spent time in Russia as well, who has that Dagestani style grappling. And he's a very good prospect, I think, for the light heavyweight division. I mentioned that earlier, that it doesn't take much. This guy's only 6-0 professionally. He's won all 6 of those inside the first round, and he hasn't really faced, the greatest level of competition, but he's just dusting through everybody. And it's not just the professional career. He has a very lengthy amateur career where he went 12-0. He had a win over Anton Turkali, who's a UFC fighter who's not half bad either. He had a win over him on the regional scene, and he is a former IMMAF world champion, and he's represented Bahrain on the wrestling team and in jiu-jitsu tournaments over in Asia, and he's very involved with Bahrain and representing his country. He's very proud of his country, and I think he's a very exciting prospect to get behind because on the feet, even though he's sloppy, this dude is built like a brick house. When he connects, if he connects clean on you, he is going to put your lights out. He is just pure power. He's not the fastest on the feet because he has so much muscle, and he does get a little bit sloppy, so that is something that he could improve on. But again, the power is for real, and then if he's able to take you down like he has been able to a lot of these guys, he's got vicious ground and pound. He's got good submission ability as well. We've seen him submit multiple guys on the regional scene. So I just think he checks a lot of boxes for me. I mentioned he's one of the best prospects I think we'll see all season, and I do expect him to have multiple advantages here over a guy like Hideo Ballato, who we saw on last season of a Contender Series. He got knocked out by Victor Petrino, and he's the former light heavyweight champ over in LFA. The 2 career losses that he has were both against Victor Petrino. I talked about him last year's video again in that matchup. I actually kind of liked him in that spot. It didn't end up panning out, but he's a guy that I think has some solid skill set. I don't trust the chin. You know, we've seen time and time again, he's been hurt, he's been rocked, and I mentioned he's been knocked out in brutal fashion by Victor Petrino, and now he's going up against a guy who hits very hard. The one thing that I'll say about Ballato is his submission grappling is pretty tricky. He's a guy that likes to chain a lot of his submission attempts together, and if you're not careful, he can catch you on the mat. The problem is, I think that Talha is just too experienced, too well-rounded that none of that's going to work. So I think Talha is much more likely to spend time in top position. He's much more likely to find a finish on the mat and on the feet because I think he is so powerful. Ballato loves to throw those naked leg kicks, and I think he can catch a big counter by Talha. That probably puts his lights out. So we're going Murtaza Talha by TKO. He's going to close things out in the DGen parlay. So to recap for the DGen parlay in the first fight of the night in the flyweight division, we're going with Davey Costa, the slight underdog. I just honestly, I don't think Hacha's very good. I know he'll probably have a cardio edge, probably the striking advantage, but I think Costa is more than capable of hanging on the feet. Those leg kicks are going to play a factor, and I just really like the takedown upside, the grappling upside, so we're going to go with him in the first fight. In the second fight, we're going with the first of 3 Russians in Raymond Magomedov. I just think he's the more well-rounded of the two. It's possible that Huffy lands a big shot early that's able to clip him, but outside of that, I really think Magomedov rolls here. I think he gets it to the ground where he needs it. In the third fight, I like Magomed Yasulov. He's the biggest betting favorite on the card, but I think it's warranted. I don't think Medina is at this level, and I think Magomed just kind of styles on him. In the fourth fight, I think this is probably one of the more competitive fights of the night, but I do side with my guy Victor Hugo. Even though he's not the best round winner, I really just see him testing the defensive grappling of Eduardo Torres and potentially catching him. And of course, in our main event, I like my guy Murtaza Talha. I think he's one of the best prospects we've seen all season, and I think he proves that on Tuesday and gets the job done. That's it, guys. Best of luck. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.